What's up, guys? Today we're doing protocols and servers. So this starts a new part of the junior pen testing. We were doing IMAP and we finished that. So now we're moving on to protocols and servers. I feel like this is you should already know a little bit about protocols and servers before diving into pen testing personally, but I also feel like this is a really good box because it's very difficult to explain to someone that doesn't have experience what a port and protocol really is, right? So the easiest way I describe it to people, and this is HTTP, FTP, blah, blah, these are the ones we're covering, right? No big deal. The easiest way I explain it to everyone is we had to create a standard, and that's all it is. It's just a standard. It doesn't, you can deviate from the standard. You don't have to maintain it, but it's a standard. And what I mean by that is when someone created the protocol HTTP, right? It's on port 80. That's just something that someone created and said, every time we use port 80, we're going to use HTTP. We're going to use that protocol so that when this box talks to this box, you know exactly what you're sending because it's on port 80. So you know that's HTTP traffic. Now, the easiest way to see this, in my opinion, is when you have an Android sending like a GIF or something, an emoji to iPhone, right? Sometimes you get those weird scrambled letters instead of the emoji. Well, that's because Android standard is different than iPhone standard and vice versa. So whatever binary code you sent to the Android or to the iPhone, the other one didn't recognize it, meaning they don't have the same standard. So when you sent it on whatever port and you said, here's my binary, it doesn't mean anything to them. Now, it's not the exact same thing, but that's where two standards didn't line up, and it doesn't make sense. That's all the only reason they created these ports and protocols. Now, protocols, again, it's just exactly what it says, protocol. It's what we do as a standard to go ahead and make sure everyone's on the same page. So let's go ahead and start diving in. So Telnet. If you guys haven't heard of Telnet, it's no big deal. Telnet is just a way to connect to ports, and it's a way to use whatever port and protocol you want. Telnet's kind of a jack of all trades, if you will. The problem is Telnet is not secure. So what that means is if you're logging in, like you can see right here, they're logging in. That is in plain text, meaning if someone's watching the network traffic, it's just going to come right across as, username, password. So we don't recommend Telnet for this type of use case, but you can also use it for a lot of troubleshooting and things like that. So, all right. So it says here Telnet is used on port 23. So again, that's a standard. That doesn't mean that everyone that's ever used Telnet only uses it on port 23. It means that that's the standard port that people use it for. Okay, and you'll see here that we can use Telnet to go into other ports. Okay, and you'll see that. So here they're just showing you an example of what it is. So Telnet, then the IP address, and then here, okay, so he logged in as Frank, used this password. Okay, cool. And now he can actually, it says welcome to Ubuntu, so he's actually logged into the server in a sense, right? Now, here's a good example of what you're seeing. So the red text is, oh, there we go, perfect. The red text is what he sent. The blue text is what's sent back to him, okay? So we're not looking at all this. We're looking at the login and the password. So you can see the red text. Every time he typed F, the server sent back F. Same with R, sent back. The reason is because when you're typing it, it's echoing back on the screen, but the password is not. Meaning if they type the password, you're not going to see it if you were standing behind me. You're not going to see it on the screen. So that's where it's supposed to hide it, right? But the problem is if someone took this Wireshark packet and they were watching the traffic, this is what they're going to get. They're going to still get the password. So keep that in mind that Telnet is not secure. It's going to show you right here. I think it says it up here. It might not say it, but basically it's going to ask us what port does Telnet usually connect by default. This is the standard again. You can Google it, but there it is. It's 23. And we're going to use Telnet throughout this, so that's why I kind of covered it a little bit. But this is a pretty useful information. I think, like I said, most of you should probably know what this is, but that's okay. If you don't, feel free, because this is good information to learn. It's definitely a building block. So HTTP. So most of you know that we don't really use HTTP that much anymore. We still use it, obviously, but it's not secure. So we use HTTPS, which is just HTTP secure, right? So HTTPS does not use port 80. It uses 443, 8080. It can use a couple, but whatever. Here, HTTP, we're going to be connecting on port 80. Again, it's just someone said somewhere, and this is way back when, that anytime you're trying to use the internet, use port 80 so that when I reach out to you, I don't have to guess or ask or try and figure out what port you're using. I can just go straight to port 80, boom, we don't have any issues. Because imagine if every web server and every website used a different port, right? If they all were like, well, I want to use 40 because it's my favorite number. I want to use 22. I want to use 73, right? Every time we try to connect to a website, we would have to scan every freaking port they have just to try and get in, just to get access to that website, right? So someone somewhere said, everyone's going to use 80 from now on when they're sending HTTP traffic. Cool, perfect. Now we know. So here's what it looks like when you're connecting. You're sending a GET request, and you're asking for that index.html. That's just the default web page when you're asking on a website. And then it sends you back the default web page. You're asking for the images and the logos that are actually associated with that web page. It sends it back. And that's how you're getting that information, right? Now, here we're going to show you what it looks like with Telnet. Now, Telnet is just connecting to the machine on port 80, which is your HTTP. And you can see you're just going to get the actual code because it's not a web browser, so it can't display the code. But it's just going to give you the direct HTML code because that's what's on the page. It's just a text document, realistically. So here it says here, of particular interest in the output above is the user needs only type a few commands to get the page they need, which is true. You only need to type, so they had to type get, then whatever page they wanted, which is index. Now you notice they specified what they want to do. It's HTTP 1.1, meaning they specified that they're using HTTP. And the reason I say that is because if you're on port 80, remember I said it's just a standard, anybody could set up any type of connection on port 80. So let's say I wanted to use SSH, but I said I want it on port 80. Well, someone could then SSH into my port 80. The problem is they're going to be expecting it to have HTTP traffic. So I could say get whatever file, then use SSH instead of HTTP. And if they have it set up on their side on the server, we can do that. So you're just specifying, hey, I'm using HTTP traffic is all you're specifying here. Then it says host, Telnet. You can put whatever you want for the host. It's just asking who the host is. No, you just have to have it. It's not a big deal. So you can see this is what you're going to get, the actual HTML raw data. And it says here, we need an HTTP server and a web browser to use the HTTP protocol. So what that means is if you actually want to view the website, you need a web browser. That's the whole point of a web browser, right? Here's the popular choices for web servers: Apache, IIS, and Nginx. If you don't know, Apache and Nginx are Linux. IIS is Windows. It's simple as that. Windows, you have to pay for licensing. It's a little bit, I wouldn't even say user-friendly personally. I like Apache better personally, but at the same time, IIS gives you simplicity because it is GUI interface. You can kind of mess with it. It is what it is. Apache and Nginx are free, but you have to know what you're doing to set them up. IIS, you can have a little less experience of a sysad or whatever and set up the same website. So here it's just telling you about basic web browsers. Okay, so I already got these flags typed in here for you guys. I did that because I've noticed in some of my videos in the past, I'm sitting there trying to type it and there's kind of a little bit of dead air, so I don't want to keep doing that. So, okay, so it says connect to the Telnet. So it wants us to connect to this box and it wants us to do it on port 80. Now, and it wants us to get the flag. So you notice we're connected. It says connected. Now, you notice there's nothing. You don't know what to do, right? Well, Telnet uses the commands of whatever protocol you're using. So if I was connecting to an SSH port, I would use SSH commands. If I was connecting to, for instance, later we're going to connect to the SMTP, we're going to use SMTP commands. So we know that we need to type get, and then our flag is just flag.html, right? Oh, not .html, I'm sorry, .thm. And there's our flag. You can see right there, it gave us our flag, and we didn't have to specify that we wanted to use HTTP because we didn't use HTTP, right? We just wanted to see the contents of that flag. We got it. Perfect. Hopefully that makes sense to you guys. That's the only reason we didn't have to specify here the actual HTTP. All right. So now we're going to go into file transfer protocol, which is used actually quite a bit still today. And you can see here it's using port 21 is because we're using Telnet, but we're specifying we want to do FTP, which FTP is on port 21. So you can see the commands change. Stat can provide some additional information. Sys can provide system type of the target. Pass-v switches to passive mode. And so this is important to note. There's two types of modes in FTP, active and passive. If you are hosting an FTP server or something like that, it's going to select them for you. You don't need to mess with it really. Most of the time when you connect, it's going to know what you want, but there's times where you might have to. So active. In the active mode, data is sent over a separate channel originating from the FTP server port 20. So in an active mode, meaning you're constantly sending data, you're back and forth, it's going to use their port 20 and your port 20. It's going to just send data, right? Passive mode, this is, let's say you just have an active connection, or I say active, a passive connection, meaning you're staying connected with them and you're just kind of, every now and then you might ask for something, whatever. You might put it in passive mode then because it's going to use a random port that your computer specifies above 1023. This is common. You'll notice this if you ever watch your network traffic and you're talking to a website or something. You might notice that one of your ports is open on like 4082 or something, right? Some random number. Well, what that is it's the data actually coming in and your machine accepting that data. When your machine sends out the first initial connection, it's going to say, hey, I open this port, go ahead and listen or send the data to it. Now, don't worry about those ports. Those ports are open for a reason. The command type A switches the file transfer mode to the ASCII characters, and type I switches to binary. Now, most of the time, it depends on what you're doing, obviously, but if you're using FTP, you might need to get direct binary files. You might be able to get the ASCII characters, however you want to do it. So it says here, we cannot transfer a file using a simple client such as Telnet because FTP creates a separate connection for the file transfer. So even if you connect to it using Telnet and you say, give me a file, it's going to create a different connection and send it that way because it uses a different protocol, which is FTP, File Transfer Protocol. Now, here's something I don't understand in this box, and I don't want you guys to get confused by it. I don't understand why they explain the Telnet portion of it. It doesn't need to be there. You could just use FTP, and it's going to have us do that. So here is what they're showing. FTP, control channel, meaning that's where you're going to send commands and blah, blah, blah. You guys are going to understand each other. And then the data channel, that's where you're going to actually transfer files. Now, when I say you can just use FTP, there's no need to telnet into an FTP server if it's set up correctly, because you can just literally type FTP on a Linux machine and do it that way. And that's what we're going to see here. So it's going to say, using an FTP client, connect to the VM and try to recover the flag. What is the flag? So you can see if we just FTP into it, where's the IP? Oh, it's right above me. Whoops. Okay. You can see we don't even have to specify the port because FTP is a standard, so it knows port 21 is what we're looking at. So it's going to ask for the name. Now we know it's Frank. And then we know it's this weird password, D2XC9CGD. Okay, and now we're logged in. So we can list just like any other thing. And then there's our FTP flag. So let's go ahead and get it. So we're going to say get, and we're going to say we want the FTP flag.thm. And you can see transfer complete. Okay, so transfer was complete. We can log out, exit. Now we ls, and there's our flag right there. Cat FTP, and there's our flag. So FTP is really simple to use. It's just file transfers. That's all it's doing. So it's not that complex to understand. Not sure why they explain it in Telnet first. I feel like it's more confusing that way, but hey, to each their own. All right. Now, SMTP. This is your simple mail transfer protocol. Now, this is just for ease of use. This is what you use to send emails, okay? Now, this, whatever you call it, diagram, whatever they want to call it, is a little bit more confusing than I think it needs to be, but I understand what they're trying to do. So you have your mail submission unit, which is what they're saying is here, and your mail transfer agent, okay? So this mail user agent, that's just your computer. Mail user agent, your computer, wherever you're sending this email from. That's all it is. Then you have this mail submission agent, right? The mail submission agent and the mail transfer agent is the same thing. It's just an exchange server or some sort of email server that you have set up that is going to actually do the transfer. That's all it is. So don't get caught up on these mail submission, mail transfer agents. The exchange server will do that stuff for you. Unless you're setting up an exchange server, you don't need to understand this necessarily. Just understand that it is submitting it and then transferring it to their mail exchange server, and then you're downloading it. That's all you need to understand. And it's pretty self-explanatory process. You send an email, he submits it, transfers it to theirs, then downloads it here. All right, that's pretty much what they're explaining. There's different protocols. So there's SMTP, there's POP3, and there's IMAP. We're going to cover them here. So SMTP is just simple mail transfer protocol, super simple. It says here, because SMTP uses clear text where all commands are sent without encryption, we can use a basic Telnet client to connect. Okay, so here they're showing that right here. So they're sending, basically they're showing how they're sending an email. So hello Telnet, blah blah, and then mail from, and they're saying who it's from, recipient to, okay, and they're sending an email with Telnet. Hello Frank, I'm just writing to say hi. Okay, cool. We don't need to do that. I don't think it's necessary anyway. So generally speaking, we don't need to memorize SMTP commands. Correct. That's pretty obvious. We aren't going to use these very often. There's very few times in your life that you're probably going to ever send an email this way. But it's good to see how it's doing it in the background while you're actually sending an email, right? Okay, so it says using the attack box terminal, connect to the SMTP port of the target, and what is the flag that you get. So all it's wanting us to do is Telnet into the actual terminal, and you see right there we get the flag. Perfect. So they just want to show that you can connect to the actual terminal that way, that you can actually connect to the SMTP and send an email via Telnet. That's all they're showing. All right, POP3, just another protocol that they use to send emails. Now, the reason they send emails with different protocols is because of the fact that, for one, SMTP did send it in clear text. So there's different ways to send emails and stuff like that, especially nowadays with where you need to encrypt emails and stuff. But anyway, you can see this is how it works, right? So SMTP is what's being sent out, right? But if you're using POP3 or IMAP, you're downloading it using those, okay? So again, it's not important that you know this. Just understand how the process might work. So that way, if you ever need to troubleshoot or something like that, you can kind of understand what's supposed to be happening and see what's actually happening. All right, so they're showing here 110 is the port that they're using for POP3, and that's the default port, by the way. You can see they're using a little bit different commands. So they're using user Frank, okay, password, okay, and it's showing one message. Okay, so he's got one message. Now if you do stat, it's showing one message and then the size of the message. And then you can see list, again, one message is what it says. And then he's going to retrieve, RETR, retrieve one. So retrieving message one, and it's the message he just sent. Hello Frank, I'm just writing to say hi. And he types quit. Boom. Okay, perfect. All right. So the example above shows that the commands are sent in clear text. Using Telnet was enough to authenticate and retrieve an email message. So that typically would be an issue because, like it says here, any third party watching can steal the login credentials. So that's why we don't use Telnet very often, right? unless we're doing basic troubleshooting, because we're not going to log into something and see that, right? So it says here, connect to the VM 10, 10, 120, 80, and we're going to do it on pop 3. And what we're trying to do is we're trying to see right here, we're going to authenticate, and we're going to try and see this stat right here. So, whoops. Oh, I got to type Telnet, don't I? Okay, so it says, okay, hello there, right? So now we need to log in using the username Frank and the password, and we can just follow the steps up here. So we just type user, Frank, password required, perfect, pass, and we need D2, XC, 9C, GD. Okay, so we're logged in. So now it's asking us, what is the response you get to stat? And 0, 0. So we don't have any emails right now. So we're going to hit plus, 0, or plus, excuse me, okay, 0, 0. Perfect. Now, how many email messages are you available to download via IMAP? Now, if you try to connect to IMAP, I'll tell you now, if you try to connect to IMAP right now, you're going to get nothing. And what I mean by that, I'll show you. So if we go right here, and it'll show you right here. So this is the same thing. And I'm not sure why they have you try this before they cover it, but whatever. So here, and we'll say and you can see, okay, we got to log in first. So okay, we don't have to, I guess. We'll go ahead and try and do it with putting the password in first. Okay, so we're logged in here. So you notice I'm putting C1, I'm just doing copying theirs, but you can put any string characters. It just needs a random string first. Don't ask me why. It just needs a random string. Okay, so you just got to put something. It doesn't matter what it is. So now we're going to list. Now, if you notice when we list, we're putting the parentheses or the quotation marks, and then we're putting a wildcard here. Now, the wildcard just says we don't know the name of the inbox, so we just need to look at it all. So we look at it, and there's our inbox right there. Okay, so we have trash, drafts, templates, sent, inbox. Just like if you were to actually have an email or your Outlook or whatever pulled up, that's what you have. So now, what is the default port used by IMAP? And it shows us right there, 143. Now, I know I didn't answer this before, but the last question, it's asking how many email messages are available for download, and the answer is none. And the reason is because when we actually log in, right, we'll say examine inbox. Oh, got to put the... Okay, and you see we have none. So there you go. That's it. This box is pretty simple, but I think it's important to understand that that ports and protocols are literally just standards. Okay, now there's different ways to connect to them, yes, but they're standards. So that's why if someone says what's the port for SSH, right? 22 is usually it, but people have SSH servers running on port 4060. You know what I mean? Like, so keep that in mind, that the standards are really important if you're communicating to a lot of people. But the standards are not as important if you're trying to securely communicate to 1 or 2 people. Okay? So hopefully that makes sense to you guys. Hopefully you guys will understand that, and then the next one will cover it a little bit more. But hopefully you guys enjoyed it. As always, if you guys liked it, hit that sub button and like the videos. It helps a ton, and we're really trying to keep this going, and we're progressing a lot in the junior pen testing lab, and when we're finished with it, we're going to start diving into harder boxes. So hopefully you guys enjoyed it. Thanks.